There was once upon a time in Ireland a man called Mochai. And Mochai was one of those, I wouldn't call him an alpha male, but he was a bit of a leader. He was charismatic. Other men swirled and swooned around him. And he was getting a young community together. And that meant a bit of hard labour. So it was early in the morning, it was a summer's morning, in fact, when Mochai and the lads were walking out into the forest, and they had to cut down hazel wands to build what would have been a very embryonic chapel. And Mochai was a man that led by example, and so soon he is ahead of the pack. He's in a part of the forest they've never been in before, and he's chopping away and he's labouring and he's even muttering a few hymns under his breath, and he's just a great, shining, lion-like example of a man. And he was being admired. He was being admired by a blackbird that was perched on a branch. Now, in those days, blackbirds could speak, and the blackbird spoke to Mochai and said this: "Looking good, son. Looking really good." And Mochai said, "Well, thank you very much. I'm just trying to lead by example with all the lads back in the bush, and they are a bit slack." And the blackbird said, "You probably may not know that I am actually an angel, and many of the birds of antiquity in Ireland and Scotland and Wales and other places can on occasion take on angelic form, and divine truths can speak through them. That's all part of the jubilance of the Celtic spirit. So what I want to ask you is, how are you fixed with eternity? I can see you're a practical man, but are you open to the mystical dimensions of your faith?" And Mochai has kind of stopped now, and he's in this discourse with the blackbird. And he says, "Well, I don't know, maybe there isn't enough of that in my life." And the blackbird said, "Would you like me to sing for you, son? Would you like me to sing a song that maybe they sang way at the beginning of Genesis, way at the beginning of everything? Maybe the song that I will sing is so sweet and deep. It was a song that God heard when he said, 'This is good, this is very good.' Would you like to hear it?" And the man said, "Yeah, of course I would." And so he settled himself. He sort of leaned on his staff and just opened up the great lettuce of his mind into the exfoliation of the song of the blackbird. And so the blackbird sang, and he sang for so long that leaves of autumn started to fall on the man, but in his bliss he did not wake. He sang for so long that sleet began to fall on the man, but so deep was his bliss he did not wake. He sang for so long, snowflakes fell on the man, for so long he did not wake. Even sun returned seasonally, and the man did not wake. He sang for 50 years. But to Mochai it was like a moment. It was a moment. And when the bird stopped and had accomplished what he was going to do, Mochai said, "Please sing me another." So he sang again, and again the young man opened himself entirely to the bliss of the encounter, to the Jasconius depth of the encounter, to the great heights of the encounter, and he was filled with it. So when the leaves fell on him, and the sleet and the snow fell on him, and finally the sun fell on him, and another 50 years passed, well, he was all right with that. That was no waste of time for his way of thinking. "I have one more song," said the blackbird. "Would you like to hear it?" And Mochai said, "Well, yeah, of course I'd like to hear it, I'll die if I don't hear it." And the blackbird said, "Good, well, that's good. I do work best in a trinity. I work best with threes, with a triad." And he sang, and maybe he had really waited the finest song till last. Maybe this really was "The morning has broken" that we are all longing to hear again. Somewhere we remember Eden, in the Adam of us, in the Eve of us, in the holy breath of us, in the mud of us. Maybe that is what the blackbird was waking up in Mochai at that moment. Not just muscle, but the deep, essential stuff that God put in us. Well, The leaves fell on him, didn't they? And the sleet came down and the snow and finally the sun again, until he opened his eyes and the blackbird was gone and the song was gone. And it seemed, though it was resident in his heart, he'd only been leaning on his staff for a moment with the hazel wands at his feet. Well, he couldn't see the men in the forest around him, so he walked back, there's no one there, and then he goes back to camp, and the strangest thing has happened. He sees that there's a church there. There was not a church before, there wasn't even a semblance of a church, and he turns up at the church and he says, well, who's this church dedicated to? And they said, well, it's dedicated to a man called Mochai, Saint Mochai, who was here, a long time ago, 150 years ago, he set this place up. Well, Mochai was getting the spook, wasn't he? It's like when Jesus talks to you, you feel all the hairs going up on the back of your neck. And he turned around and he said, well, where are the lads that helped build this church? And they said, long dead. Long dead. They've been dead, 120 years, something like that. Mochai went and he sat down where actually it was the place where they used to sleep, him and the lads. And he just took it all in. He took in the fierce bliss and sorrow of the moment. And he lived for a long time, Mochai, and he became part of that community, ironically, that was actually named after him. He was there functioning again, but he was such a great preacher. He was such a great presence, because now when he spoke, it wasn't just about, missions and objectives and vision. He spoke about dreams and patience and the animal presences and the birds and eternity and God, a God that has 1 foot in the universe and 1 foot outside, a God that you can trace his hoof prints in the snow, kind of God. And they say when finally it was time for Mochai to go to his reward, he made his way back out into the hazel wood, where he could hear the singing of the blackbird. So I would hope we all do more listening. The world is filled with chatter these days. I hear so much about theory, and there's so little encounter about this. The wrong part of our head is being addressed most of the time, I would suggest. It's that chronos part of time, not that kairos part of time that we are forced to attend to relentlessly until we are all out of time. More once upon a time, I say. Less fictions of necessity, more stories of the essential. Onwards.